The Pacific Ocean in the years preceding 1941 was a vast and contested field of ambition. Across its reaches, the Japanese Empire sought to define its destiny as a maritime power, its naval staff convinced that control of the sea equated to control of history. Within the Admiralty in Tokyo, strategic theorists debated how to strike a crippling blow against the United States before the industrial giant could mobilize its full might. The answer, they believed, lay in a sudden, devastating assault on the Pacific Fleet. Pearl Harbor, with its concentration of battleships, appeared the perfect target. Behind the grand strategy stood an array of experimental weapons and ideas. One of the most secret was the Ko-hyoteki, literally Target A, the code name for a class of miniature submarines conceived as instruments of stealth and sacrifice. Their origins lay in the interwar fascination with unconventional warfare. Japanese engineers at the Kure Naval Arsenal had studied foreign designs, including Italian human torpedoes and German coastal subs, but sought to develop something uniquely suited to Japan's doctrine of decisive battle. By 1938, prototypes of a two-man submarine were undergoing trials in the inland sea, demonstrating surprising agility and speed for their size. The craft's intended use was infiltration of enemy harbors and surprise torpedo attack against moored vessels. Technically, the Ko-hyoteki represented a complex compromise between practicality and idealism. The hull measured roughly 24 meters, driven by electric motors powered by lead-acid batteries. It could achieve speeds up to 19 knots, but for only short intervals before depleting its limited charge. Navigation instruments included a magnetic compass, depth gauge, and gyroscopic controller, but no sonar. Communication was restricted to short-range radio, seldom usable once submerged. Two 450mm torpedoes were mounted in the bow, each capable of sinking a capital ship if it struck true. Yet endurance was scarcely 10 to 12 hours, and the crew compartment offered almost no comfort or ventilation. The men chosen to operate these vessels understood that survival was improbable. The strategic vision that brought the mini-subs to Pearl Harbor originated with Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's broader plan for aerial assault. While Yamamoto emphasized carrier aviation as the principal weapon, elements within the submarine force argued that small craft could complement the air attack by penetrating the harbor's inner defenses. The combined fleet staff approved the inclusion of 5 midget submarines as an auxiliary component, a decision reflecting inter-service politics as much as tactical logic. Their mission: infiltrate Pearl Harbor prior to the first air wave, launch torpedoes against anchored battleships, and retreat if possible to rendezvous with mother submarines offshore. The operation required coordination among multiple submarine divisions. Each mini-sub was carried piggyback on a larger I-class ocean-going submarine fitted with clamps and release gear. The mother vessels, I-16, I-18, I-20, I-22, and I-24, departed the Kamagakubi Naval Base in late November 1941, bound for Hawaiian waters. Their crews maintained strict radio silence. Inside the cramped hangars, the two-man teams prepared themselves for what they knew would be a one-way voyage. Selection of personnel followed a rigorous psychological and technical screening. Volunteers from submarine flotillas were tested for endurance, mechanical aptitude, and devotion to duty. Many were in their early 20s, trained intensively in the art of silent approach and torpedo firing. The training program, conducted at Kure and later at the secret base on the island of Ura Bay, simulated harbor infiltration using scale models of potential targets. Crews learned to navigate by shoreline silhouettes and to interpret the faint vibrations of ship machinery transmitted through water. The instructors emphasized that success depended not merely on skill, but on absolute composure under isolation. By early December, the 5 I-class submarines had reached their assigned positions roughly 10 nautical miles off Oahu's southern coast. Each carried its midget craft secured on deck, its battery fully charged, its torpedoes armed. On the night of December 6-7, local time, orders were transmitted via coded signal. Climb Mount Ni-Taka, 1208. The phrase authorizing the attack on Pearl Harbor. Within the darkened compartments, the crews of the mini-subs readied themselves, sealing hatches and checking valves. Shortly before midnight, the first of the small craft detached and slipped into the Pacific. The tactical plan called for the submarines to reach the harbor entrance by 3 a.m. and await the onset of the air assault at 7:55 a.m. From their positions inside, they would fire torpedoes into the confusion, exploiting the distraction caused by aircraft overhead. To maintain secrecy, they were to avoid engaging defensive patrols unless discovered. Each crew carried demolition charges to scuttle their vessel should capture become imminent. The environment they faced was formidable. Pearl Harbor's entrance channel was narrow and well guarded by mines, anti-submarine nets, and patrol craft. The depth of the water and complex currents made navigation treacherous. Moreover, the Japanese possessed limited intelligence on tidal patterns and harbor defenses. Reconnaissance photographs provided only general outlines. Even under ideal circumstances, reaching the inner anchorage undetected would have been extremely difficult. At approximately 1:42 a.m., the U.S. minesweeper Condor sighted a periscope off the entrance and notified the destroyer USS Ward. This contact, though routine at first glance, signaled the beginning of the first naval engagement of the Pacific War. At 6:37 a.m., Ward fired upon a small submarine attempting to slip into the channel. A direct hit was followed by depth charges, and oil soon appeared on the surface. The American crew reported the incident, but in the absence of corroboration, higher command treated it as inconclusive. It was only decades later, through underwater archaeology, that the wreck confirmed Ward's claim. The 4 remaining mini-subs pressed onward. In the gray light of dawn, Ensign Kazuo Sakamaki aboard HA-19 struggled to control his craft after its gyrocompass failed. Without accurate bearing, the submarine drifted onto coral reefs near the harbor entrance, damaging its propulsion system. Repeated attempts to free it only increased battery depletion. By the time the first Japanese aircraft arrived over Oahu, HA-19 was effectively incapacitated, rolling in swells while its crew fought exhaustion and fumes. Inside the harbor, chaos unfolded. At 7:55 a.m., waves of Japanese aircraft descended upon Battleship Row. Bombs and torpedoes struck Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and other vessels. Amid this devastation, the mini-sub's role was almost invisible. One managed to penetrate the inner defenses and fire 2 torpedoes toward the seaplane tender Curtis, missing narrowly. The destroyer Monaghan rammed and depth-charged it moments later, destroying the intruder. Another submarine was caught in the anti-torpedo net and scuttled by its crew. The remaining 2 either grounded outside or were sunk before firing. From an operational perspective, the results were negligible. No confirmed hits could be attributed to the midget submarines. All 5 were lost, and none of their mother submarines succeeded in recovering them. Nevertheless, the Japanese Navy initially believed that at least 1 had returned. Radio silence prevented verification, but commanders interpreted an intercepted signal as proof of success. Tokyo newspapers later reported that the midget crews had fought heroically inside Pearl Harbor and sunk several ships. The American side, meanwhile, only gradually pieced together the evidence. Salvage operations, after the attack, recovered debris of a small submarine at the harbor entrance, its bow section crushed and torpedo tubes empty. Divers found additional fragments over the following months. Naval analysts recognized that Japan had used an entirely new weapon system. Reports circulated through intelligence channels warning of possible similar attacks at other bases. The discovery prompted a rapid expansion of anti-submarine measures across the Pacific. In Japan, secrecy shrouded the mini-sub operation. Even within naval circles, few officers knew the details. Official communiques emphasized the success of the air attack, while references to submarines were deliberately vague. The crews of the lost vessels were listed as missing in action and later enshrined as war heroes. Their portraits appeared in naval memorial halls, accompanied by poems extolling their bravery. Kazuo Sakamaki, the lone survivor, became an accidental symbol on both sides of the Pacific. After his craft grounded for the final time near Waimanalo Beach, he attempted to swim ashore, only to be captured by U.S. troops. As the first Japanese prisoner of war, he was interrogated extensively, but revealed little of strategic value. American newspapers publicized his capture, portraying him as a representative of Japan's fanatic resolve. His disabled submarine, HA-19, was salvaged, repaired for display, and toured across the United States during war bond drives. Photographs of the tiny vessel, with its cramped interior and dented hull, became visual proof of both enemy ingenuity and futility. From Tokyo's viewpoint, Sakamaki's survival was an embarrassment. The ethos of the Ko-hyoteki program had demanded total sacrifice. Living prisoners contradicted the ideal. His name was omitted from posthumous honors, and his family endured social stigma. Only after Japan's defeat did the stigma fade, allowing historians to reassess the episode with objectivity. The mini-sub project, though tactically unsuccessful, illustrated Japan's capacity for technological experimentation. Naval engineers analyzed performance data from surviving components and began developing improved versions, the Type B and Type C craft, with greater range and more reliable control systems. These later models would serve in operations at Sydney Harbor and Diego Suarez in 1942, achieving limited but more tangible results. The inclusion of the midget submarines in the Pearl Harbor strike also reveals much about Japanese military culture on the eve of the Pacific War. Decision-making combined rational strategy with spiritual idealism. Officers spoke of the special attack spirit that could overcome material inferiority. The Ko-hyoteki crews were volunteers in name, but selected through a process emphasizing devotion over survival. This approach foreshadowed later forms of suicide warfare, such as the chitin human torpedoes introduced in 1944. In many respects, the Pearl Harbor midget submarines represented the first manifestation of that mentality within a formal naval operation. As the Pacific conflict expanded, American analysts revisited the lessons of Pearl Harbor's undersea assault. The Office of Naval Intelligence conducted technical evaluations of the recovered HA-19 and its components. Engineers noted the high standard of Japanese craftsmanship, particularly the precision of the pressure hull and torpedo firing mechanism. They also identified weaknesses: limited battery endurance, poor stability when surfaced, and inadequate ventilation. The findings influenced U.S. counter-submarine design and contributed indirectly to post-war research in small craft engineering. By early 1942, the Imperial Japanese Navy had lost interest in repeating such harbor penetrations against heavily defended targets. The tactical surprise at Pearl Harbor could not be duplicated, and the risk to crews outweighed potential benefits. The surviving submariners of the program were reassigned to standard fleet duties, though the legend of the 5 special attack boats persisted within propaganda channels. In the weeks following the attack, U.S. Navy divers worked tirelessly amid the oil-slicked wreckage of Pearl Harbor. Their task was primarily salvage and recovery, yet amid the twisted steel of sunken battleships, they encountered unexpected clues. A curved hull section not matching any American specification, fragments of torpedo casings, and pressure gauges marked with Japanese script. Gradually, a picture emerged that the December 7th assault had included an undersea component far more sophisticated than previously assumed. Reports compiled by the 14th Naval District documented the discovery of miniature submarine remains, noting features that indicated pre-positioning prior to the air raid. These findings prompted new questions regarding how early the enemy had reached Hawaiian waters and how extensive the reconnaissance preceding the strike might have been. For the American command structure, recognition that enemy submarines had penetrated so close to the harbor entrance was unsettling. The Navy initiated a review of coastal surveillance methods, emphasizing radar calibration, sonar monitoring, and nighttime patrol procedures. Lessons learned at Pearl Harbor influenced the creation of a multi-layered harbor defense doctrine encompassing magnetic loops, indicator nets, and coordinated destroyer patrols. The incident demonstrated that even a formidable anchorage could be vulnerable to small, stealthy craft employing asymmetric tactics. Meanwhile, Japanese naval authorities received limited information from the operation. Communications from the I-class mother submarines confirmed only that none of the midget craft had returned. In the absence of evidence, the combined fleet headquarters issued a cautiously optimistic communiqué suggesting partial success. Internally, however, reports compiled by Submarine Force Command acknowledged severe mechanical and navigational problems. Despite this recognition, the operation was framed domestically as an example of unparalleled heroism. Each pair of crewmen was posthumously promoted 2 ranks and awarded the Order of the Golden Kite. Portraits of the 10 men appeared in national newspapers beneath poetic headlines describing them as the cherry blossoms who fell in glory. The ideological weight attached to the mini-sub crews reflected broader currents within wartime Japan. Military culture equated willingness to die with moral superiority, a concept rooted in pre-Meiji samurai ethics and reinforced through state education. Within that framework, the Ko-hyoteki program embodied spiritual purity, young officers volunteering to become instruments of the emperor's will, accepting that their deaths were the natural culmination of service. From a modern analytical standpoint, this conflation of technical innovation with sacrificial ideology created both strength and limitation. It inspired courage, but impeded operational realism. Post-war declassification of Japanese documents provides a clearer understanding of the technical and organizational difficulties that plagued the mission. Design reports from the Kure Naval Arsenal revealed that battery capacity often fell below predicted performance, with voltage drops leading to loss of propulsion within hours. Gyrocompass drift exceeded acceptable tolerances during long submergence, rendering precise navigation impossible. Test logs indicate that during pre-deployment trials in the inland sea, at least 3 training units were lost to accidental grounding or explosion, yet the program continued without significant modification due to time pressure. Such evidence illustrates how the urgency of strategic surprise overrode engineering prudence. On the American side, examination of the captured HA-19 offered valuable insight into Japanese naval technology. Engineers from the Bureau of Ordnance conducted a systematic teardown of the vessel at the Mare Island Navy Yard. They documented the modular construction of the hull, noting meticulous welding and efficient internal layout. Particular attention was given to the Type 97 torpedo firing system, whose simplicity impressed U.S. analysts. Technical intelligence derived from these studies was circulated among Allied navies, contributing to broader understanding of Axis undersea capabilities. The HA-19 was later transported across the United States, exhibited during war bond drives to millions of citizens. Its presence served an educational and propagandistic purpose, tangible proof of Japanese aggression and of American mastery in capturing its instruments. In the Pacific, the Imperial Japanese Navy continued to experiment with midget submarine operations. The Sydney Harbor raid of May 1942 employed an improved version of the Ko-hyoteki, achieving limited tactical success, but again resulting in total loss of crews. Similar attacks at Diego Suarez in Madagascar and in the Indian Ocean demonstrated persistence rather than effectiveness. Each operation reinforced the perception within Japanese command circles that such weapons were primarily symbolic effective for morale and propaganda, less so for decisive outcomes. Nevertheless, the technical lineage of these craft would evolve into the Kaiten human torpedo program of 1944, marking the grim culmination of the philosophy first tested at Pearl Harbor. After the war, Allied occupation authorities undertook comprehensive surveys of Japanese naval technology. Surviving engineers from the midget sub program were interviewed at Kure and Yokosuka. They described the developmental process candidly, acknowledging both ingenuity and shortcomings. Their testimony confirmed that senior officers viewed the Pearl Harbor deployment as experimental. The operation's inclusion within the broader attack plan had been justified primarily on psychological grounds. It symbolized total commitment and provided an additional layer of surprise, even if material results were minimal. The rediscovery of wrecks decades later transformed scholarly understanding of the event. In 1960, divers located the remains of a midget submarine outside the harbor, its hull partially buried in sand. Subsequent exploration using advanced submersibles in the 1990s and early 2000s identified at least two more. One, lying at a depth of over 1,000 feet, displayed evidence that both torpedoes had been fired. Forensic analysis suggested a trajectory consistent with torpedoes that struck West Virginia and Oklahoma. Although correlation could not be definitively proven, the finding reopened debate among historians and naval engineers regarding the actual contribution of the mini-subs to the damage inflicted that morning. Marine archaeologists from the Hawaii Undersea Research Laboratory undertook extensive documentation of the wrecks. Their studies revealed the craftsmanship of the hulls, the narrow confines of the crew compartments, and the enduring integrity of the steel despite decades underwater. Preservation efforts balanced scientific inquiry with respect for the remains of the crews, treated as war graves under international convention. Exhibitions and scholarly publications stemming from these discoveries enriched public knowledge of early Japanese submarine design and expanded awareness of the technological dimension of the Pearl Harbor operation beyond the well-known air assault. From a strategic historical viewpoint, the midget sub episode exemplifies the intersection of innovation, doctrine, and ideology. It highlights how the pursuit of decisive victory through surprise can lead to overextension when technological maturity lags behind ambition. The Japanese Navy's fascination with shock tactics, whether aerial, undersea, or psychological, reflected both creative foresight and systemic vulnerability. By contrast, the U.S. response demonstrated the adaptive capacity of industrial powers to learn from failure. Within months, American anti-submarine doctrine had evolved substantially, incorporating lessons derived from a weapon that had itself failed to achieve its purpose. Quantitatively, the damage attributable to the mini-subs was negligible. 5 units lost, no confirmed sinkings, 1 prisoner captured. Qualitatively, however, their impact resonated through multiple dimensions. They exposed vulnerabilities in harbor defense, influenced subsequent Allied countermeasures, and offered historians a lens through which to examine the moral economy of modern total war. The juxtaposition of technological sophistication and deliberate self-sacrifice reveals a cultural paradox: how an advanced industrial society could employ cutting-edge engineering in service of archaic ideals of honor. Kazuo Sakamaki's post-war transformation provides an individual case study within that paradox. After years as a prisoner of war in the continental United States, he returned to Japan in 1946. Choosing a life of modest anonymity, he joined the Toyota Motor Corporation, where he promoted peace and international cooperation. For decades, he refused to discuss his wartime experience, regarding it as a personal failure and a moral warning. Only in the 1990s did he publicly acknowledge his role, donating his memoirs to peace museums and emphasizing reconciliation. His trajectory from would-be martyr to advocate of peace symbolizes Japan's broader societal evolution from militarism to pacifism. In historiographical terms, research on the Pearl Harbor mini-subs reflects the maturation of Pacific War studies. Early narratives in the 1940s and 1950s, constrained by limited evidence, portrayed the submarines as inconsequential curiosities. Later scholarship, benefiting from Japanese archives and underwater archaeology, repositioned them as integral to understanding the conceptual breadth of the attack. Scholars such as John A. Dean and Tamura Yoshihiko have argued that the mini-sub operation represents a transitional phase in naval warfare bridging classical fleet action and modern special operations. The methodological shift from anecdote to forensic reconstruction has illuminated not only tactical details but also the intellectual milieu of those who conceived such a mission. Technical retrospection underscores the sophistication and limitations of early 1940s Japanese engineering. The Ko-hyoteki hull was constructed from high-tensile steel with precise tolerance joints, its electric propulsion system remarkably quiet. Yet the absence of adequate life support equipment rendered endurance insufficient for complex operations. Subsequent generations of small submarines, worldwide British X-Craft, German Seehund, and later American swimmer delivery vehicles would address these issues through improved oxygen management and navigational instrumentation. In this sense, the Pearl Harbor prototypes served as unintended prototypes for later advancements in Special Forces submersibles. The cultural legacy of the mini-subs endures through memorials and exhibitions. The HA-19 is preserved at the National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas, displayed alongside interpretive materials explaining its role within the attack. Visitors are struck by its diminutive scale, a machine designed to alter the course of history, yet barely large enough to contain 2 men. In Japan, replicas and recovered components are exhibited at naval museums in Kure and Etajima, contextualized within narratives emphasizing both technical achievement and the tragedy of war. Educational programs use the story to promote reflection on the consequences of militaristic ideology and the limits of technological determinism. From a comparative perspective, the episode invites examination of how nations integrate emerging technologies into doctrine. The Japanese Navy's deployment of midget submarines illustrates a top-down innovation process driven by prestige competition among service branches rather than empirical testing. The air arm, favored by Yamamoto, dominated strategic planning, while the submarine force sought relevance through bold experimentation. The result was a hybrid operation in which divergent logics, aviation, and subsurface warfare coexisted without full synchronization. Modern analysts recognize this as a cautionary example of organizational misalignment within complex military systems. Psychologically, the mini-subs also played a subtle role in shaping American perceptions of the enemy. The notion of Japanese soldiers willing to die in self-imposed confinement beneath the sea reinforced stereotypes of fanatical devotion, influencing wartime propaganda and public opinion. Yet post-war reinterpretation has humanized the participants, portraying them as young professionals acting under the constraints of duty and indoctrination rather than innate fanaticism. This shift reflects broader historiographical trends, emphasizing structural and cultural explanations over racialized caricatures. In evaluating what the Japanese mini-subs really achieved, a balanced conclusion must distinguish immediate results from enduring consequences. Operationally, they failed, no ships were conclusively sunk, and the element of surprise they hoped to amplify was already secured by air power. Strategically, they had negligible effect on the outcome of the Pearl Harbor attack. Yet analytically, their significance lies in revealing the mentality of total commitment that defined Japanese war planning and in illustrating how technology can become an extension of ideology. Their existence complicates the narrative of Pearl Harbor as purely an aerial event, reminding historians that the attack unfolded across multiple domains: air, surface, and subsurface, each reflecting different dimensions of human intent. The final accounting of the midget submarines thus occupies a liminal space between triumph and tragedy, innovation and futility. Beneath the statistics of tonnage and casualties lies a deeper lesson about the limits of precision in human enterprise. The men who guided those tiny vessels toward an enemy harbor exemplified courage in the service of a flawed cause, while the engineers who built them demonstrated ingenuity constrained by doctrine. In their intersection, one perceives the broader story of modern warfare, the attempt to reconcile technological mastery with moral purpose, and the recurrent failure to do so. Today, when scholars and visitors examine the corroded hulls resting on the seabed outside Pearl Harbor, they confront material evidence of that contradiction. The steel endures, but the ideals that propelled it have long dissolved. The mini-subs achieved no victory measurable in conventional terms, yet they succeeded in leaving a trace that compels continued inquiry. Through them, historians glimpse the shadow of a war that sought meaning in destruction and find, in their silent remains, a cautionary testament to the perils of believing that courage alone can compensate for misjudgment.